fearless. It's only right. My head's up. I stay strong.
Hello, we are back with another episode, Creating Strength episode. And I am your host, of course. I am Lauren Andrea Kennedy. I am a learning and leadership strategist and an executive coach. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to deal with a bad boss. Now, first things first, I want to remind you the previous episode is toxic leaders, the 4 types and how to deal with them. I would watch that one first. This is sort of a sequel to that one because I want to dive deeper into how do you actually deal with a bad boss. Now, the 4 types are Mr. and Mrs. Ego, okay? The person that always thinks that they're right. Then you've got Sneaky Snake, the little manipulator, the person that goes behind backs, maybe start some gossip, things like that. And then you've got Hibernating Bear and Cowardly Lion. Those are the 4 that I am addressing in these videos. It does not mean that those are the only 4. Trust me when I say there's lots of bad behavior out there. But I also want to mention before I really dive deep into this topic and how you deal with these is that oftentimes I say everybody is a leader. You really are. Everyone has a leader within them. The power of one is real. And so it doesn't matter what your title is, like you're a leader. If you're a spouse, your husband, wife is expecting you to be a leader. If you are a parent, you're a leader to your children. If you belong to a church, you're a leader. If you belong to a community group, you are a leader. However, when I describe these 4 types of bad behavior, that's the one caveat to all that. I do believe that everyone's is a leader and everyone deserves to be their very, very best. But when I say toxic leaders, I'm using that word very loosely because if you're seeing this behavior, then that person is not a leader. I'm not giving them that title, not granting it to them, not a leader. If you are the one displaying that behavior, let me tell you, you are not a leader and you need to work on your bad behavior, okay? The reason for that is, you guys, I don't know if you're aware of these numbers, but 85% of the workforce is actively disengaged. You probably heard the term quiet quitting. People are just not very happy to be at work. And that's because organizations are not showing up for their employees the way that they should be. 70% of that disengagement comes from, guess who? Leaders. So in this, I feel like this post-COVID world that we're in, depression and anxiety and just mental health issues in general are a much bigger problem. And that, folks, is an issue in itself. We spend too much time at work. 85% of our life is spent at work, meaning we're not spending that time with our families. We're trying to make money so that we can survive. And it's an ethical and moral obligation that organizations need to provide professional development, leadership development. They need to provide mental health resources, and above and beyond, like they need to provide that development to their leaders so that you, the employee, if you are watching this, are happy at work, so that your boss isn't displaying these bad behaviors and you don't have to watch videos like this because you're trying to deal with a bad boss. All right, we all have bad habits. And I believe that even if you're displaying these behaviors, that if you have the desire to grow, then that's all you need. I've seen leaders, I've trained leaders where they just had some blind spots. They didn't realize what they were doing. And so that's the fun part, is that, yeah, you might become a leader. Here's some more numbers you might not actually be aware of, is that most people are promoted. They get their first leadership type position roughly around the age of 30, if not a little bit earlier, so promoted to supervisor or team lead. But they don't get any development until the average age of 42. Are you kidding me? There's a huge disconnect here. So if you're looking at the stats, 85% of us are disengaged. 70% of that comes from leaders. Now, if those leaders who are causing that disengagement have 12 years to form bad habits and aren't getting any feedback, they're not told what they're doing wrong, no shit. Like, the numbers are telling us the story, okay? So I believe in the power of one as well. So if your leader is not getting any leadership development, it's okay, because there's something that you can do about it, and you can actually help develop your leader, and you can deal with a bad boss. I've got some great tips for you today. And the first one that we're going to tackle is Mr. and Mrs. Ego. We all have somebody in our life who thinks that they're always right. literally every day, all day, this person is always right and you can't tell them anything different. Most likely, this person is also the one, if you think about your Zoom meetings or the ones in those boardrooms, this person is usually the first one to speak up. They always have something to say. And generally, when they do speak up and have something to say, there's no meat behind it. So I'll explain. For example, I'm the type of person, if I'm sitting in a meeting, I like to absorb and listen. I will only speak up if I think I have something that I've truly thought through and something really valuable to say. So I am not going to be the first person to speak up. I'm going to wait for a few other people to speak so I can hear their perspective, because that's just my personality. But Mr. and Mrs. Ego does not think that way. And if you think about those people who have spoken up in your meetings first, are they always right? Do they always think that they're right? Probably. So there's 3 ways that you can, the green marker, let's see if you guys can see this. There's 3 ways that you can deal with Mr. Ego and Mrs. Ego. The first one, see if you can see this. I want you to lean in. I want you to lean in with curiosity, okay? The second one is common ground. I want you to seek common ground. Like my fancy little board. Okay. And then number 3 is learning. I want you to focus on what you can learn. So 1, 2, 3 different ways. Let's dive in to all 3 of those. So what you want to do is lean in with curiosity. Okay. The person that thinks that they're always right, you want to be asking questions, and not why questions either. Why questions generally put people on the defensive. So what I want you to do is think what and how and where. Very open-ended questions that require an explanation and critical thinking. So, for example, hey, that's an interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about why you believe that? I would say, where did you get that? Where did you come to that from that conclusion? Sorry, I didn't say that right. This is going to show interest, and what it does is encourages them to elaborate on their reasoning. So lean into, where are they getting that answer from? How did you come up with that? So instead of the why, you can use why in that scenario, but you can also say, how did you come up with that? Where did you get that? Really open-ended phrases, questions will help you out. Second question, as an example, have you ever come across a situation where your opinion changed on something? This is more of a direct yes or no. Again, it requires some critical thinking where, hey, when was the last time I did change my opinion on something? Number 3, third example, what are some of the reasons why someone might disagree with this? I love, love, love that question. It's open-ended and it makes them think of the other side. I'm going to give you a 4th bonus question. One of my favorite questions to ask is this, because we all make assumptions, okay? We assume we're right. We assume that there's a certain way that things have to be. We generally, as humans, we tend to think that, our families need to be a certain way and our job needs to be a certain way. And even myself, I'll use this as an example, is like leadership needs to look a certain way. I say that very loosely because when I think of leadership looking a certain way, I'm talking about behaving well and being inspirational, but I know that can look different ways. So here's the 4th question for you. What else is true? What else could be true? Because this is going to encourage them to think, okay, I've given them this answer and I believe that this is 100% the right answer, but there could be another side to this. You want them thinking about different perspectives. So, folks, I want to encourage you with Mr. Ego, Mrs. Ego, is to ask questions, okay? Listen to them, hear them out, and then when you hear their answers and you hear their stories, what questions can you ask to dig in like a detective? Okay, that is one of my biggest pieces of advice in any situation, with any bad boss that you're dealing with, is to strike up conversation and to lean in with curiosity. Okay, I talk about this with my leadership development all the time. So my favorite question, if you take anything away from this, is what else could be true? But What are some of the reasons why someone might disagree with this? Have you ever come across a situation where your opinion changed on something? All great stuff, okay? And don't worry, I will put these questions in the description. Okay, the second piece of advice that I can give you for dealing with Mr. Ego, Mrs. Right, whatever you want to call it, is seeking common ground. So, hey, I see where you're coming from. Maybe there's a way to look at this that incorporates both of our ideas. Whoa, that might throw them back a little bit, but it challenges them to bring in your perspective. And so I'm going to ask you to have a little courage with this, because oftentimes when it comes to our leader, our bad bosses and managers, it can feel scary. It can feel icky, like I'm going to get in trouble if I do this, but you're not, okay? Trust me, you're not. There's nothing that HR is going to come at you and say you did something wrong by being curious and asking a question and asking for perspective. Here's another example. That's a valid point. Is there anything I mentioned that you agree with at all? That's a little bit more, it depends on the situation. So be careful with that one, because you want to acknowledge their perspective while subtly inviting agreement. So the trick here is seeking common ground, like, hey, is there room for my opinion in here? Is there room for my perspective? You want to bring both perspectives in on the same playing field and play around with it a little bit. You want them thinking that, hey, what could we do with this? All right. And my guess is no one has ever approached them in that way or asked them those questions. So remember that as well. Okay. Number 3 is focus on learning. We always have something to learn, and so does your bad boss, okay? Hey, here's something else you could say. I'm always looking to learn new things. Can you share some resources that support your view? Now, I'm a big believer in asking the question, what else could be true? And then, how did you get to that conclusion? Where did that come from? All detective type questions. That's the question. Can you support how you got there with some resources? So they have to kind of back up what they're saying with facts. What you'll catch a lot of people doing is making assumptions, and then they state their opinion. So they made an assumption, then they form an opinion. And then sometimes humans, the way that we are, we state it as an actual fact, but it's not. And so I think it's completely fair of anyone in your life, not just your bad bosses, to ask, hey, where did you get that from? How did you come to that conclusion? And asking for those resources as an employee, it's important to know if you have something to learn or they know something that maybe you need to know to get on the same page, they need to be able to provide those resources for you. Okay, so again, I'm always looking to learn new things. Can you share some resources for me that support your view or support how you got to that conclusion? Okay. Then another one is, this is a complex topic. What are some different schools of thought on this? Okay, so for anything a little bit more in depth, a little bit more complicated, if you don't know what to ask, just say, hey, this is a little complicated for me. This is complex. State what it is. Don't be embarrassed. Just state what it is. And then again, asking for different perspectives to be brought in. So what are some of the different schools of thought on this? It takes some getting used to, but you notice how these are open-ended. It's what, it's where, and it's how. You can ask why questions, but really try to keep them open-ended. That's going to help the most, okay? But also actively listen, mind your body language, because if you're crossing your arms, if you have a look on your face while you're asking these questions, it's going to come across super defensive. So there's a way to deal with a bad boss. However, you have a role to play as well. Not getting upset, asking these questions with an open mind. Being curious means you're open to learning, and you also don't believe that you're right. So be careful. You don't want to be Mr. or Mrs. Ego as you're approaching your boss, who is also this way. You really have to come at it from a learning perspective. So lean in with curiosity, seek common ground, okay? And what can you learn? Like, what can you learn from this person, okay? I also love the question, how do you know that to be true? So what else could be true, and how do you know that to be true, are two of my favorite questions, because it challenges assumptions and it requires the person to give me where did you come up with that idea from? And then they have to really think about it. So what else could be true challenges the perspective And how do you know that to be true is a much better way than why, because then they have to tell me where it is their thought process came up from. So out of all of that, feel free to use those 2 questions. So let's talk about sneaky snake, the manipulator, the boss that just makes things uncomfortable. My tips for you on this are: 1, set boundaries and document everything. You're going to have to lean into your brave side with a boss like this and learn to speak up for yourself. Okay. So boundaries, clearly define your work hours. Okay. So if you have a boss that's asking you to work after hours or emailing you, this is a great example, emailing you at 10 o'clock at night or super early in the morning, it's okay to set boundaries. And 1, I just wouldn't be checking them, but that's how you set boundaries is, hey, I don't check my email after 5:30 p.m. So, just let them know that. If you are required to keep notifications on, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'm not actually sure legally that they can require you to do that, but anyway, it just requires a conversation, setting those boundaries. You're at home with your family, you don't have to be checking it and on 24/7. Okay, and then documentation. I want you to keep a really good record, writing things down, saving emails, anything that feels like it goes across the line, and just keep a folder. That's the unfortunate truth with a boss like this, is that they are very sneaky and you need to have proof. So when you go to HR, you need to have actual proof. And a lot of times we forget to save the things that need to be saved because, well, you're just busy. We're going throughout our day. And then you don't think that you're actually going to need it. Number 2, communication is absolutely key here. I want you to clarify expectations with this type of a boss. So don't let them be ambiguous or throw very unclear instructions at you. I want them to be clear. So expectations, instructions on assignments and projects, make them be very specific. Okay. And that's good. Again, leaning into being brave, being courageous enough to say, hey, I'm going to need a detailed explanation of, XYZ, getting it in writing, getting it in an email. If you have questions, my gosh, that's another piece of advice. Do not be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's better to ask to get that clarity around it than to try to assume and do something wrong. And then you've got that back and forth with that bad boss, that manipulator. So focus on facts. I find that the sneaky snake is very emotionless, and I have been around people that just have some downright psychotic behavior or psychopathic behavior, meaning they have no empathy and don't really care. Don't really give a crap what you have going on and don't handle emotion very well. So they're not emotionally intelligent people, human beings, okay? And so with these types of bosses or these types of people, you got to focus on the facts, okay? Don't take things personally, and the manipulative side of them is just that. They're trying to get ahead, or whatever it is it's a selfish aspect of whatever they have going on. And they might be very unaware of how they're coming across to you, okay? So when responding to accusations or manipulation tactics, stick to the facts and avoid getting emotional. I find for some people, this can be very difficult because that psychopathic behavior and that manipulative behavior does, especially for like a personality like mine, or at least I used to, I've learned how to deal with it over time. It very easily drums up emotion, and you've got to take a breath, take a minute if you need to, and then come back and respond. Okay. So number 1, the first piece on dealing with the sneaky snake is setting boundaries and documenting everything. Number 2 is communication is key. So clarify expectations and focus on facts. Number 3 is seek support. Tell people, I want you to get to a trusted colleague and to HR. Those are the 2 people you need to find to get back in your corner. You need HR to know what's going on, but then you need a trusted colleague who isn't going to use anything against you, somebody who can kind of watch what's going on. They can also document and see what they see, okay? So number 4, consider your options. This is just the truth, right? If you're working with someone who's got psychopathic behavior, like, is it worth working with them? Start looking for a new job. Like, it could take 6 months to find a new job. So do you want to deal? Do you want to take these tactics and deal with this type of a person, or do you just want to move on? Is it actually worth it? What's the rest of your working environment look like? So if it's not manageable, folks, let me tell you, it is not worth your mental health, and just start looking for a new job, okay? All right, number 3 is the boss who stays isolated, the one who stays in their office all the time. They seem really disengaged. I have 4 tips for you on how to deal with this boss, okay? So number 1, initiative and initiate clear communication. Okay, so you go to their office. All right, I'm sure this is the type of person that has an open door policy, or they say that they do, but they're probably always busy. So schedule regular meetings. You have to take initiative with this person, whatever the reason is that they are not coming out of their office or they're not scheduling one-on-ones with you. Folks, the power of one, it's a real thing. You schedule the meetings, you go in and talk to them. Don't wait for them to do it. Okay, you're a big boy, you're a big girl, you do it. So scheduling regular meetings, being proactively request regular meetings to discuss projects and get feedback. You're going to have to ask for feedback. The open door approach. So let your boss know that you have an open door policy, whether you work in a cubicle or an office. Hey, come chat with me whenever. That's initiating and being more proactive. So number 2 is alternative methods of communication, or alternative feedback methods, is sending emails requesting feedback. And so before you start on a project, either schedule that regular meeting or send an email. Here is tentatively what I have planned. Here's my project outline. Can you give me some feedback? Again, being proactive, that's the theme here. So number 1, initiating clear communication, and then alternative feedback methods. So if they're always in their office and maybe their door is shut because they're on virtual meetings or whatever, I don't know, 90% of the time, you're going to have to send them maybe a Teams message, scheduling a virtual meeting, or just sending them that email asking for feedback. That's being proactive. Number 3 and number 4, leverage existing resources and then address the issue directly, promptly and directly. So number 3, leveraging existing resources. So team meetings, okay? Utilize team meetings to present project updates. So if it's your direct boss and you have team meetings regularly, use that time to speak up and ask for input. Don't be afraid to ask for input in front of other people. So you're going to have to, again, lean into that brave side, okay? And then number 4, address issues directly, choosing the right time. So scheduling a one-on-one, saying, here's something that I need as an employee. I need feedback. I need X, whatever it is you're not getting from this person. You are going to have to be proactive, and you're going to have to lean in and give them feedback. Okay, so depending on the type of person, they may or may not receive it well. You're going to have to decide that on your own. But yeah, choose the right time, focus on improvement. So frame the conversation around wanting to improve your work. Try not to make it about them doing something wrong. You're trying to make improvements. You're trying to improve the organization, the team, yourself, and you want to do your best projects. So here's what I need. Hey, do you have any feedback? Just really being clear and open communication, honest and transparent. I think if you're in some sort of leadership position, be prepared for that feedback. Be prepared for your people to say, here's what I need from you. And if you're not, you shouldn't be in leadership. I find it crazy to think how many employees out there are afraid to offer feedback or say, here's what I need. Like, this is the kind of communication that I need, because they're afraid of getting in trouble. Like, that's crazy to me. So don't be afraid, okay? So last one is the cowardly lion, and I got 4 more tips for you on that as well. Number 1 is take the initiative and be the problem solver. 2, clear communication and control delegation. 3, focus on progress and transparency. And 4, I'm going to need you to manage your expectations. Oftentimes with the cowardly lion, they're probably dealing with a confidence issue, imposter syndrome. Maybe they're one of those new leaders I was telling you about. So they're younger. I think we all deal with imposter syndrome at one point or another. But so 1 is take initiative and become a problem solver. Kind of the theme, right, is taking that initiative Anticipate issues, okay? Try to foresee potential problems in your projects, but research solutions. Don't ever go to this person without solutions. In fact, I recommend that with any boss. If you're bringing a project and there's a problem, there's an issue, think of solutions first. What can you do before you actually go to your boss, whether they're a bad boss or not? Become a go-to person, okay? This person might be your leader, but you're a leader as well. You are not helpless, and you can come up with solutions, and you can consistently deliver well-researched solutions. You can build trust with other people and establish yourself as a reliable source of information and problem solving within your team. There's no reason for you to sit back and just do nothing and wait for the cowardly lion to figure it out, because it ain't going to happen. So you got to take ownership, okay? And that's probably one of the next videos I'm going to do is on ownership and the drama triangle. I think that when we understand the role that we play each day and the story and like what's ours to own, all of this becomes a whole lot easier, okay? So number 2, clear communication and controlled delegation. I want you to frame decisions as options. So this goes back to those solutions. So let's say your boss struggles with making choices. They struggle with making decisions. I don't know. I've dealt with a couple of those type of bosses. If you give them 2 to 3 options, this gives them something to pick from. You can weigh the pros and cons of each, but again, come to them with solutions and maybe a few options that they can pick from to help them make decisions. Okay. And then ask, tell, ask delegation. Clearly explain the task, propose your approach, and ask their input before proceeding. So here's what I'm going to do. Here is A, B, C, explain what's going on. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that approach? Okay. So give them the outline, and then it's basically a way of asking permission, but then they've just made a decision. Yeah, do it. But be very clear, be very detailed. So ask, tell, ask, delegation. This allows them to feel some ownership. So it's like, okay, you came up with it, but you basically asked permission in a roundabout way. Okay. So 1, take initiative and become a problem solver. Number 2, clear communication and controlled delegation. So here we go. Number 3 and 4 on the cowardly lion is focus on progress and transparency. And 4 is manage your expectations. So 3, regular updates. Keep the communication flowing. Schedule frequent but brief check-ins to update your boss on progress, roadblocks, and any potential issues. The more communication, the better. There's no such thing as over communication, okay? And celebrate small wins. So when you see them make a decision, when you see them do something really well, celebrate them. Most likely they're dealing with confidence issues. Give them a high five. Trust me, your bad boss needs recognition and reward as well. All of us do. We want to feel valued, seen, and heard. Your boss is no different, okay? So let's go into managing expectations. Don't expect dramatic change. That goes with any of the 4 types of toxic leaders, okay? They're not going to become magically better overnight. If you take these pieces of advice and tactics and use them over time, I promise you, you will see some change, okay? And if you see any sort of pushback or retaliation, you have to get HR involved. I'm not telling you to do anything that is like against the rules or it's rude. If you're controlling your body language and your face, you can ask these questions and do all of these things, and your boss will get feedback through conversations through time. Okay. So managing your expectations. So don't expect things to happen overnight, and then set your boundaries with all of them. Okay. Hopefully you have a support system where you work. My other piece of advice, my last piece of advice for all 4 of these is to have a support network wherever you are. So whatever type of bad behavior you're dealing with, have that person that you can lean on and talk through things. Have them challenge assumptions. So it's sort of like an internal coach of sorts. and and feel free to comment on this video if you need some help dealing with your bad boss. If there's a particular situation, I'm happy to help walk you through it. I've done it plenty of times, but my guess is you're making assumptions as well. And there's probably a part of you that maybe thinks that you're right as well. And so how do you know this to be true? What else could be true? And what stories are you telling yourself? So you need a support system that you can bounce ideas and bounce stories off of, and they can challenge you on your assumptions, and they can challenge you on the stories that you're telling yourself, because we all do it. The stories that we tell ourselves, we can exaggerate things. And oftentimes we do make assumptions and we do tell ourselves stories. They lend themselves towards the negative. Okay. So those are my tips for you on how to deal with the 4 types of toxic leaders: Mr. and Mrs. Ego, Sneaky Snake, Hibernating Bear, and the Cowardly Lion. Trust me, what I want you to do here, I will leave you with this thought, is assume positive intent. These leaders, I do believe, have positive intent. They do care about their people, but they just don't know. They don't know because nobody's had the conversation with them. Nobody's given them feedback. There's probably hasn't been any surveys done in your organization. If there has been, and they have had leadership development, that's a little bit tougher. And then you have to kind of go to, if they do know better and they've been provided with feedback, but they just don't care. If your boss doesn't care, is it worth staying there? Those are the things that you have to weigh. So find your support system and then assume positive intent, okay? But challenge your own assumptions, challenge your own stories, and I will leave you with that. Remember to subscribe to my channel. I am slowly growing. I love making these videos, and I do take suggestions. This video came from a comment on my last video, and I absolutely love talking about these topics. So subscribe, make sure you comment. I'll try to help you out with any bad boss that you're dealing with. But yes, until next time, you guys, keep creating your strength.
I know someday that it'll all turn out. You'll make me work so we can work to work it out. And I promise you, kid, that I'll give so much more than I get. I just haven't met you yet. I might have to wait, I'll never give up. I guess it's half timing and the other half's luck. Wherever